So a warm welcome to Molly O'Brien. We're going to talk a lot about sort of what you're doing in your life. You're a midwife, but I know you've had a very interesting life, so I can't wait to hear all about it. Let's just start with where you are in the world right now.
Well, hi Tessa, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is, I think we had a quick chat before we started, and I think it's quite interesting, your approach. I'm in Brittany in France right now, by the sea. I can hear it in the distance there. Yeah.
What's the weather like today?
Actually, it's absolutely miserable. We're having some well-needed rain, so it's starting to clear a little bit now, but it's basically been chucking it down this morning.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not alone then, having lots
of
So I'd like to dive straight in and ask you, what were you like as a child?
And it's such an interesting topic. You said to me around about 10 years old, and that kind of threw me a little bit, because I think that's when I started to change a bit. As a younger child, I was absolutely rebellious. I was the rebel. I was a bit different to the rest of my siblings. I've got two sisters and a brother, and I'm the second eldest, but there's only 15 months between the older one and me. So we were kind of, incredibly different. And so I was rebellious. I remember my mother telling me that as a toddler, I was hanging around the door when she answered it to a Romany woman who had arrived at the doorstep with some charms, as they did back in the day in Scotland. I was probably everywhere. And my mother, as the lovely woman she is, invited her in for a cup of tea. And the woman said to her, "You've got trouble in your hands with this one." And I was about 2 or 3 years old, no more than that. She said, "This is the rebel." And my mother loved to tell me that later in life. And that's why I've never forgotten it. And indeed, all the stories that are around that time about me were that I was quite difficult to handle. I had a mind of my own and so on. But the 10-year-old child, that was a different story. And that's when I was coming up to puberty, and I changed quite a bit. I became, I was still very determined, but I was brought up in a Catholic family. And I suddenly, I don't know how sudden it was, but I wanted to be a nun. I decided. I wanted to be a nun. I was going to church. I went to mass every morning before school. I had my breakfast packed so I could be there. I quite liked that time in the morning. I'm not a morning person, I can assure you, but at that time it was quite nice to have that morning before everybody arrived in class with my sandwich for breakfast. But I wanted that, and I wondered why. And I said to you earlier, I felt like perhaps I was towing the line a bit. I wanted to do what perhaps was going to please my parents. I wanted that we had the 11 plus or whatever, and there was only a few kids out of my class who would go to the good high school, St. Patrick's, that was really important to my parents, and I did get in, so that was really good, and it was a good school, and I was happy to go there. But the Catholic, the nun thing is a different story, and actually, I think it was because my body was changing. At that point, I was starting to have little buds of breasts. I felt really conscious of it. And in a sense, I wonder if it was almost like a protection that I would get covered up and be a nun, and that would be, I'm not sure if that's the case. I mean, a lot of people who are brought up Catholics at that time, and I'm 66, so it's quite a long time ago. And I wonder if they went down that route for other reasons, and perhaps I did. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I do remember being very conscious about my changing body, and actually really uncomfortable with it, and uncomfortable with the attention that I got as I was like 12 years old, really wanted to cover up and didn't like anybody looking at me. So it's interesting. That changed though later in throughout my teens, because if I'm going to go down that route of becoming a nun, I need to know what it's all about. And I really I was looking for spirituality. I was looking to find the essence of what was going on with that religion. Could I find it? No, not really. It was very much indoctrination, and I struggled with that. Just believe, no, I need to know more. And that was my quest then in my teens. I needed to know more. And I couldn't get it until I went to India.
I was going to ask, because I know you traveled quite a lot, and I wondered whether that was part of the drive to go to other cultures.
Yeah. Well, no, I've always been like that. My husband says every time a country's mentioned, he looks at me and I say, yeah, I do. I want to go there. So I want to go everywhere. I'm just like that. And I think that was just something that drove me. However, I did actually was seeking something a little bit more, and went there when I was 21. And one of your questions was what transformational events happened in your life, and this was one of them. So I was 21. I actually worked with Mother Teresa in Calcutta and met her. Actually, she was really welcoming. She invited me into her office, as she does all volunteers, and had a good chat. And I thought, I'm going to find this spiritual world here that's going to fit with me and what I'm about. It didn't. It didn't fit well with me. I didn't feel comfortable still. I still had lots of questions. And it wasn't till I went to an ashram in South India that I met Bede Griffiths, who was an incredible priest, stroke monk. And he taught me something very different that was actually really spiritual. And at that point, I stopped being a Catholic. And I thought, no, I can't do this. This is not for me. And but apart from that, the whole journey through India was incredible. And Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, we fitted a lot in about 10 months. And I had huge adventures, and also some scary ones.
Yeah.
But I was young and naive and very trusting, so that's what you do. But yeah, it was wonderful, and I that was really transformation for me. Big transformation.
I'd like to go back for a moment to going and volunteering with Mother Teresa, because I also spent some time in India, and I remember I was in Dharamsala, where the Lama, is based. And somebody had just come from volunteering with Mother Teresa's foundation, and he was waking up every night, this guy, having nightmares because of his experience of working with the dying. And what was it like doing that kind of work?
Well, I was a nurse, so that was another thing I have to say about myself. Was I don't know how many people there are who actually know what they want to be from the moment they're born. But I was always going to be a nurse. It was absolutely something that was part of me from the word go. Funnily enough, my sister always wanted to be a teacher. You think, oh, well, nurse teacher. But we both did that, and we both were incredibly happy in our work. And but we had as a child for Christmas, I would get a nurse's uniform. My sister would get teacher stuff, and we loved it. We adored it. So I was a nurse from the very word go. 17 and a half, I started training. And then I worked a little while in a coronary care unit after training before I went to India. So I had that background. Exactly. I had that background. I knew what I was going into. And I worked in the House of the Dying. And Mother Teresa was there. She was alive at that time. I was shocked by because she was a good woman and had a vision of how what she could do, but it actually wasn't really followed through by the missions. Many of the missionaries of charity became a cult. Every middle class Indian family wanted their daughter to be part of the missionaries of charity because it had status, and they didn't. Some of them really didn't care. And I was shocked by some of the things that went on, you know, like, you know, mistreatment of the elderly and using drugs that were out of date that the West had sent to the East, which was not uncommon and probably still isn't uncommon, out of date and sometimes quite dangerous as well. So they were handing these out, digoxin, for example, like they were sweeties. It was just pretty awful. But yeah, I was well prepared for it because I had witnessed death before.
And so you're already nursing, and then maybe you can explain to people what you do now and sort of how you got to that point.
Oh yes, so always had that just part of me, that caring, nurturing, wanting to help people, wanting to relieve suffering. And I think that's really quite opposite for what's happening right now. I had my children. I lived a very unusual life. I was on the road, traveller on the road in a van, and left with my 3-month-old and my husband, my partner, and we travelled, and then I had another baby, and well, in the truck in the Pyrenees. And so I was surrounded by other women who were also having their babies like this, out of hospital, at home, or in trucks and teepees. It was very normal. My background, my mother had her babies at home as well, although my sister and I were born in a Catholic nursing home, St. Francis's maternity home, run by nuns, but that was still low key, you know. It was like a midwife-led unit, and so it was very normal. Birth was very a normal event, social event, and that stayed with me all my life, that was the case. And then I had my third baby in the community, where we started living in communities, and there were loads of babies born in the community. And that again reinforced everything for me, that this
was
is
your normal.
That's my normal, except for my first baby, who it was very difficult with him. They wouldn't let me have a home birth. They refused to send me, well, the GP refused to send me a midwife or say that, you know, give me any support at all. And I was quite young, I was 23. And in the end, I was, oh, okay, well, I'll go to hospital then. I did kind of get it because I lived in the middle of nowhere, about 40 miles away from civilization, you could say. We had no phone, we had a dodgy car that sometimes worked. We had no electricity, we had gas lights and a peat-fired Rayburn that heated the water and so forth. We were very, you know, basic. It was wonderful, but I in the end I decided, yeah, okay, I'll go to the hospital, and it was awful. And he was back to back, and for me that wasn't the right position for him, because it caused me great distress. And I was on my back. At that time, 1979, you didn't get up and move around very much. They were, you know, lie there, you know, you couldn't get up. And because I was young and I was trusting in what they were saying to me, I thought, well, okay, well, it was so hard to fight it, actually. I mean, we did try. We said, hang on a minute, but it was really difficult. So compared that to my other births, it was quite astonishing. It was like, wow, this is so different, and this is not right. And as a nurse, I became much more interested. As a mother, I started to think, I want to get involved with this. This is really important. How women give birth is really important, and I loved giving birth. I loved it. I loved being pregnant, and I knew that there was another way. And I was drawn into that from my own experience.
I'm wondering also with your travels whether you were exposed to any women in different cultures giving birth. Because, for example, years ago I went to Ghana and we went to quite a rural village. I was part of a sort of network, sort of yogic network, and they had a clinic out in a rural area. And I think I was quite naively sort of expecting it all to be very traditional and maybe going out into nature. But actually there was a sort of auntie in the village who always took care of the births, and she would get the mums to lay on their back on a bed and shout at the woman, come on, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And as soon as the baby was born, whisk it away to give it a good scrub. And I was like, oh, this is not what I was expecting. So, but on the other hand, you know, I've had other experiences where, you know, different cultures where I've seen a very different way, or I used to do belly dancing, and apparently the origins of belly dancing is to get your female friends and family around, and you would dance together and encourage the woman during labor, and like the camel where you do the undulation is to mimicking the contractions, you know. So there's such a wealth out there. I wonder if you had any experience.
There is, it's so true. I mean, I went to I didn't meet any pregnant women in India, or I wasn't, you know, exposed to that part of life in India. But we did go to Morocco, and it was while I didn't witness the births, I did know of. We ended up in the mountains. Don't ask, it's a story in itself, but we're in a kind of almost like a fortress, and the women and the men were separated, and we'd actually given somebody a lift, and this is where we ended up. and they took me out to see a newborn baby with the mother, and I was pretty horrified. I mean, the baby was being given a bottle, and they have the cones of sugar, and they were just smashing up the cones with massive amount of sugar and water, and I don't know what else was put in that bottle, and that was what they're giving this very newborn baby. I was really shocked, really shocked, and I thought, crikey, this is not what I expected.
Well, I was born in Kenya, and my mum talks about there that it was sort of the influence of the West coming in, and some babies would be breastfed and they would be given formula because it was seen as a status thing if you could give your baby formula. So they were becoming very overweight because they were having masses.
I know. Well, I would have been less worried if it had been formula, but it was just these huge lumps of sugar and water, and it was like, I mean, really, I was very concerned about that. I thought, I wonder where, you know, why is that happening at that time? Of course, I understand better a little bit now. When you're talking about community, I'm going to say that actually I found that that was really part of what I experienced in Scotland with my siblings being born. My sister and I were at school. My two other siblings were born at home. When they were born at home, we'd come back and the door was locked. I remember the last child, the youngest, the door was locked. We had to wait outside on the step because the midwife was with my mother, and the coal fire was blazing, and there was warm towels around. I could see through the window this was all going on, and nobody was allowed in that house until that baby was born. And then when we were allowed in, the midwife was it was almost like she was protecting my mother and the baby, the unit, and people had their place, but this was women's work. That was what came to me very, very much so. By the way, I'm not anti-male midwives. I'm completely not. But that's what was a strong influence. Was this is women's and community work, and then the people who came arrived with food and friendship with my mother to support her and celebrate this new baby, and it was all women who came. So My grandmother actually was, the midwife didn't get there in time for my brother, who arrived before my sister, the youngest one, and my grandmother attended that birth. And, you know, again, it was just this women coming together, and I loved that, and I think it's never left me.
So I sort of interrupted you before because about different cultures, but so now you're delivering these amazing courses around biomechanics for birth and taking it both to professionals, but also you do courses for parents, don't you?
Yes, I do indeed, because this is information that everybody should have. This is actually about how our bodies work. It's anatomy and physiology. If we understood this better, then we'd understand why it doesn't work when we run into, for example, labor dystocia. There's a reason for that. And right now, oh, you see, now I'm feeling the, whoa, getting the fire up, because I'm really, really annoyed about this. Let me, just in case I forget, the reason I focused on this, there's a couple of reasons. The reason why I focused on labor dystocia. One was that I had suffered it myself, and I realized it didn't have to be like that. And instinctively, I just knew that shouldn't have happened like that, that could have been different. And then as a midwife, I was up in arms about pretty much everything in the hospital institution, institutional birth. And but in the end, I had to choose something to focus on, because otherwise my energy was dispersed everywhere, and you can't fight every single battle. You've got to choose your battles. And my battle was suffering, and suffering from a labor dystocia. And this is what it's all about, Tessa. Women shouldn't suffer having their babies. This is unacceptable. A traumatic birth is unacceptable. And that's what led me down that route. I need to know why. Why is it so hard for those babies to come through the pelvis? And after years of attending courses and training and self-study, and right up till now, I mean, last night at 1 a.m, I read research on my phone. I mean, I'm constantly looking for more information to develop this further and to have a better understanding of it. But clearly, the problem, as far as I'm concerned, the theory is labor dystocia comes from pelvic imbalance, pelvic restriction. The baby can't come through. Either that will be skeletal, or the bony pelvis itself, or soft tissues, and of course they're connected. So there, you know, there's always that connection, and that can come from below and from above too, because you know the pelvis is a central piece of architecture. So that what I get really angry about, and I still am furious, is that we don't know about this. Why don't we know about this? Why have women suffered so much, and that we still insist on forcing that baby through the pelvis, and ignore the reason why, the root cause? I think that's appalling.
From somebody, I used to work in a hospital in a rheumatology department as a researcher, but for somebody that's outside, you know, who isn't a midwife, or maybe you can shed some light on this. What I don't understand is why the obstetricians, they're very intelligent people, aren't doing the same inquiring and reading all that new research that's coming out also about the biomechanics. Why are they slower to take that up?
I think it's cultural. In the end, it is down to culture. It's cultural in so many ways. We have the institution, and we've already had, you know, we have the Ockenden report, which was very clear. There's cultural issues within our system, in all the things that we read, in how midwives are distressed because they are unable to do their work, or they get, you know, just rammed down that route, because if you don't, there's bullying, there's difficulty, and they find themselves in a really difficult situation, and they can't all just leave. I know that you know, everything, I would just leave. No, it doesn't work like that. Life isn't like that. People, for me, actually, I wanted to be an independent midwife. I didn't want to stay in the institution when I saw how horrendous it was for a lot of women, not for every woman, because actually I'm really grateful for the NHS. I'm absolutely, you know, it's wonderful. But I was on the brink of going down that route. I had been offered somebody who was stepping back. I was offered their whole caseload and their equipment. It was handed to me on a plate, and I went to see them. But we had just bought this place, which was a ruin in France, and I was one who could bring in a stable income.
I love how, you know, you really clearly show how the fire, you know, has driven where, you know, life has taken you. And that I think often that this happens a lot in the episodes, is that having children often brings up a new path. It can be a transformational moment for so many people, not always then working in maternity care, or, but it's such a powerful time. Yeah. I'm wondering how, another question that I always ask is how cycles affect somebody's work and life, like any kind of cycle. So it might be, you know, previous menstrual cycles earlier in life, might be circadian rhythms, lunar.
Yes, that is really interesting. And cycles, yeah, absolutely. I recognize them much better. I think I've recognized them for quite a few decades now, but I'm going to say the word accepting them is something that I've come to do more easily in these later years. I used to see the cycles, the rhythms of life and what happens in life. Sometimes the yin and the yang, you have those quiet moments, and then you're really, really busy, and then quietens down again, and then really, really busy. So those kind of like cycles are quite interesting as well. And when I started this work and becoming self-employed, you think, okay, everything, let's see how this goes, and then you have quiet times and you get a little bit worried, is that going to be all right? And then suddenly, oh whoosh, you get inundated with lots and lots of inquiries and lots of work and so on, and then it quietens down again, and that is the rhythms of life, isn't it? But with menopause, I mean, I struggled with my menopause. I had it a little bit early, and I actually wasn't that long. I became a midwife in my very late, I think I was 39. And I think at 40, I started to have irregular periods, and I realized something was amiss because I never had irregular periods ever. In fact, I thought I was pregnant. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And I was in my training. But in fact, it wasn't. And it continued for quite a few years through my 40s. My 40s weren't great for me. And I really struggled with that, and all that comes with the menopause and the difficulties. So that cycle, that's actually, when I think of puberty, if we go back to puberty, actually having periods, I didn't suffer at all. I had periods, and my menstruation was fine. I had a little bit of, you know, discomfort, but I wasn't in it. Like some people do suffer from that. I didn't have that, but I did have self-consciousness about my changing body. And then as a mother, the younger mother, I was actually traveling on my own. That was quite different. Not on my own, with my husband, my partner. We were quite alone for a lot of it. We were traveling and finding ourselves in the most amazing places, but we didn't have a big community, and we started meeting up with other travelers. But even then, you were quite isolated. So I didn't have that community. And then I did the opposite. As I continued having my children, my third one, I was in a community. So we had overwhelm. So we were all living together, like a big community of
Roughly how many people?
There were, well, the house itself took about 6 families, I think. And then there was outside, and there was cart lodges and there was trucks, maybe half a dozen buses and trucks, and some people maybe in a teepee in the garden. And then in another community, we moved. We had about 5 years there, and we went to another community for much longer, 20 odd years. And sometimes we were really crammed there, so there would be, oh gosh, I'm trying to think, 15, 20 people, lots and lots of children. So that brought its challenge. So I had isolation, and I'm a very social person, but I had a lot of isolation in the early years of being a mother. And then I had I really enjoyed the challenges, actually. And it's given me a lot of what I can use now, actually, and a lot of growth. And there was a lot of women, and we had women's circles, and we danced together. We did the 5 waves, and we did Tai Chi, and we sang, and that was really amazing time for me. So being exposed to other people's cycles as well, and what they were going through, that was really interesting.
That's why I set up my women's circle, actually, was because I'd got interested in cycle awareness, and I was just really curious to know about other people. So I set it up, and it was in my home, and that's been running for nearly 8 years now.
That's great. Brilliant.
And that's why I started doing the work with younger girls, because I thought, well, really we should take this to, because a lot of women would say, why didn't I know this like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? So let's take it to the girls. And what I'm hearing from you, it's almost like we need to take the information about birth to younger people, so that they're not having all this conditioning about how birth, is painful. It's always got to be challenging. We see it mostly still on the bed rather than,
absolutely. Well, this is my work that I'm doing, and this is what I'm doing. When we talk about biomechanics for birth, which is the name of the course, I delve deeply into all of that. We need to look at that. This is a dynamic process, and that in England, certainly, and I think it's the same all over, 83% of women are giving birth on the bed, but that's because they only have that in the room. That's the main feature, the dominant feature. Having said that, what you need is the freedom to be able to move, the option available to you, and that's not what's happening. That's not what's available to women as they give birth. In your bedroom at home, where you may give birth if you're having a home birth, you've not got a lot of space. In my truck, I didn't have a lot of space. I didn't need a lot of space, but I knew that I could walk outside. I could have that if I wished. But it's just a freedom to get up and take up positions that feel good for you, that you can move around in. It's just having the option available to you, and the understanding that you can, and the trust. It's multifactorial. So you've got to have the option available to you, but you also got to have the trust in yourself and your own instincts to take up the positions that feel right for you. And that's another dismantling that needs to take place. How can you do that when people are so conditioned, as you say, Tessa, so conditioned that, first of all, the healthcare professional knows better than you about your own body, your unique individual body? That's just rubbish. And secondly, this culture of giving birth immobile. To me, this is a travesty.
So this is a hard question. What can we do to change the culture? Big question.
Yes, a huge question, and we do have to question. We do have to ask questions. I think some of the really, what I would like to see, this is multifactorial, and there's no straight answer, but I think we can start very strongly with the kind of information that's given to women and their families and their partners. We can even start in school, actually. But say, for example, breast preparation classes. One of the things I always ask is, do you know that you can decline anything you're offered? And every single time people go, no, I didn't know that. So first and foremost, let there be a knowledge that they can decline. You do not have to accept anything, everything that you're offered. I think that's really important. I think it should be physiology informed breast preparation classes. And I feel quite strongly that most of them, and certainly the ones that have gone down the pan a little bit since pandemic, but most of them, I would say, NHS ones, are about compliance. This will happen and that will happen and so on and so forth. I mean, even back in the mid-1990s, when I was training, I never forget some of the birth preparation classes that actually had a lucky dip bag and it had forceps in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, and epidural needles and suture needles, and it was all, so this is about pathology rather than actually increasing people's confidence in their own ability to give birth in this totally, physiological process.
That's really
so
heavy, a lucky dip bag
with forceps and epidural needles and suturing needles, and yeah, I know.
So
there you
lucky.
are. Yeah, honestly, lucky dip. Yeah. So, well, no, it was a put your hand in here and pull whatever out. But that actually brings me to, so we got that. So let's go for physiology informed birth preparation classes. Let's also change the narrative. Okay, that's what I think we need to be doing, and how that's done is multiple ways. My logo says changing the conversation in childbirth. It's about changing the narrative. It's about reframing, and we need to reframe those who have had a joyous birth, a straightforward birth, where they have come out unharmed, should not be regarded as lucky. Oh, you were lucky. No, she wasn't. She just actually gave birth in the way that she could do, the way she's made to do, that she was supported. She had good support and she had the right environment, no doubt, that influenced it. And there you have it. It is as simple as that for many, many women. And let's stop saying you're lucky, because that needs to change. And then the healthcare professionals need to see, and I have a part of my courses, let's talk about what hinders birth physiology and maternity services. Let's expose it, let's say it out loud. So that's my contribution, is to do that, is to change the narrative, do that through my course. Most of the healthcare professionals who come to it actually engage very well with the first part of it, which is dismantling. It's dismantling, and it's about critical thinking, critical analysis of the existing model. And that is the biomedical model. And the biomedical model is currently dominant, and that's a problem.
Well, I love that fieriness from when you were 2, 3, 4 years old has come to the front
it's
again.
Still there. It's always been there. I mean, my husband saying, "Oh, she's always been like that." It's true, I have. I mean, that fieriness was there all the time, but it just got channeled down routes sometimes that didn't fit. They didn't always fit comfortably with me, but I had chosen, because I felt that was a safer route for me at the time, like going to be a nun. But I was always a little over the top with things. I'm always a bit over the top. I get very obsessed. That's why I do this job, because I am completely and utterly focused on research and finding out more information to inform the teaching that I do. And I think that's really, really important. It's not done. Oh, can I just have one more thing I need to say about this, because it makes me so mad. We need this information. We are not seeking it. And that's part of the culture. The problem is that women's health is underfunded. So we don't have the funding to look at this, and we need to change that. We need to get furious about that. The fact that we didn't even know the full dimensions of the clitoris until the early 2000s is is it astonishing when you have a culture like that? Is it astonishing when you don't have women's health valued, where there's underfunding of the research involved in women's health, and in particular reproductive health? 8 years before the average diagnosis of endometriosis. That's the time it can take. That's absurd. That women are suffering so much, and we need to be shouting out about that. That is not right. So my obsession leads me to research more, to delve very deeply and analyze. I have to say, it's not obsession in the way that I get stuck on things. Absolutely not. It's not like that. It's about delving deeply and getting to understand it better.
My feeling is that the change will come from women themselves.
Yeah.
It has to come from those grassroots of saying, actually, we want a better deal on this. Absolutely.
But it does take everything. I agree. And that's why I still teach birth preparation classes. And I teach the knowledge I have about mechanics and how the baby comes through, and because the women have to have that knowledge as well. Totally agree with you. But I think it will need, we need to come at different angles. It needs a multi-pronged approach. But you are absolutely right. The women are very much a part of that change.
Well, thank you so much for all the wonderful work you do in the world, Molly O'Brien. Where can people find you?
Oh, they're going to find me on my website, Optimal Birth. So that's www.optimalbirth.co.uk. I'm going to just also mention that because, and this is the good thing. So here's some really good things. I'm going to get furious and all the rest of it, but I'm actually delighted that my courses and this information is being embraced. It's being embraced. I am absolutely overwhelmed with work, and I'm now developing a network of trainers to teach what I teach, although I'm putting all of this information, because it's so kind of new to people, I'm putting this information online, and then we'll have practical workshops. But the women, that's biomechanics for birth, that's the course is called. But the women and their partners, for them, their course is going online as a standalone, so it can reach all over the world as well, and that's called Moving for an Easier Birth, and that will be available really, really soon. The next few days, I think it's ready to get up and out there.
Well, I know, but absolute pleasure to talk to you, Molly.
Thank you, Tessa, and lovely to speak to you too.
I'll put all the links for things below.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much.